A veteran of the hyper-competitive automotive industry, he has been solving problems, defining actions, eliminating waste, and delivering results for decades. Jim Farley is the president and CEO of Ford, where he is transforming the company using a lean operating system and a keen focus on customers and innovation. Ford's goal is to lead the automotive industry's digital and electric revolution. Under Farley's leadership, Ford has boosted investment in electric vehicles to more than $50 billion and has set ambitious targets for scaling global production capacity. Farley says that to accelerate real change in an organization across all functions and especially on the factory floor, you have to define what good looks like, give teams permission to act decisively, and lead through accountability. Uber has become globally synonymous with getting where you need to go without driving yourself and delivering dinner or groceries when you don't feel like going out. Uber's CEO, Dara Khosrowshahi, is a seasoned executive with a background in both engineering and finance and has led Uber's operations in more than 70 countries around the world since 2017. Prior to Uber, he was CEO of Expedia, growing it into one of the world's largest online travel companies. Following driver shortages as COVID lockdowns were lifted, Khosrowshahi went to Genba and moonlighted as an Uber driver and delivered Uber Eats on an electric bike in San Francisco. Some of what he found during those trips has helped shape an improved experience for Uber drivers and bike delivery personnel. He says his time driving and delivering on the Uber platform was a wake-up call. Please welcome Dara Khosrowshahi and Jim Farley.
Great to see you, Jim. Thank you for joining us virtually. I know you have a few things back home to deal with, so we appreciate your making the time.
Thank you, Dara, for allowing me to join. And I apologize. The UAW contract, as you said, is like right on the doorstep. So I just couldn't get there, but it is awesome to see you.
And for folks who don't know, Jim and I have known each other since both of us took over as CEO, and while we're two very different kinds of companies, we both work in the automotive sector or transportation sector in different ways, and we have been, one of our goals, or one of my goals has been to work closely with Ford and with Jim, and we recently announced a partnership with the Ford Drive program. One of the biggest issues that we have in terms of Uber and getting drivers onto the platform is that generally a third of our drivers don't have the financial wherewithal to go out and buy a car. More importantly, as we're thinking about this transition to the electrification of our transportation system, it becomes harder to make the economics work in terms of getting drivers to choose an electric car. So our team put their brains together with Jim's team and came up with a Ford Drive program where essentially our drivers get to lease short-term the Ford Mach-E's, which we're going to talk about, which are one of the most awesome cars in the world, for a month to 4 months and lease them directly from Ford. It's a first time when we've had this kind of a program directly with an OEM, an auto manufacturer, and it definitely was a part of Jim pushing his team to get a little uncomfortable, to really innovate, which gets us to the discussion that we're going to have as far as innovation goes. So Jim, if you wouldn't mind starting, you have a bit of an unusual background for the CEO of a US manufacturer in that you spent 17 years with, I guess you call them the enemy now, with Toyota. Learning the Toyota production system. Can you share a little bit with us what you learned, that experience, what you learned, and what you've taken to Ford, and also what you found that's been different in terms of Ford, how you've had to shift some of those approaches under Ford?
Thanks, Dara. I actually decided not to go to Ford. My grandfather was an hourly worker for the company in the early 1900s, and so there's a lot of pressure on my family. If I was going to automotive, I had to go to Ford, and I purposely didn't go to Ford because I was very attracted to Toyota. There were four of us who were working on Lexus, the beginning of Lexus, before it came out, and I thought it was a great opportunity. And my family back in Michigan didn't talk to me for several years. No joke. It was really, I kind of got a divorce from my family going to Toyota. But I love the company because it's a bottom-up company. I mean, they are so deep into lean that the Toyota way is something you're taught immediately you get in the company, and pretty quickly there is no wiggle room about how you operate even as an entry college hire. Lean, Genba, Kaizen, PDCA, all of these concepts are something that you live by. And as you get more senior at Toyota, you actually do less because the whole bottom of the company runs the place. And as you said, Ford was totally the opposite. One of the reasons why I didn't come here, but in '08, when we all saw what was going to happen in the U.S. industry, I had the opportunity to join Alan's leadership team and come here because I just didn't want to see the company. I wanted to do my part as an American to make sure Ford survived. Turns out we didn't go bankrupt, and what I found here was a total top-down culture. And so you can't just take the Toyota system I was used to and impose it on Ford. It would take way too much time. So as a CEO, for me, the most important thing is to define operating behaviors, lean behaviors that are not natural for the Ford team, and to actually ask the leadership team to model these and live these, which are completely unnatural to the leadership team at the beginning. And actually, I've gone through now the top 500 people, and we evaluated people on whether they can live this, can or have. And if they don't, we find another path for them outside of Ford. Because lean is such a big bet for us as a company, it's non-negotiable. We've gone through that process to hold our leaders accountable for living this Ford operating / lean approach. But it kind of begs a different question, which is, in your business, lean is super important. You've been there for 6 years, and you're trying to change the culture. And I saw in the intro your Genba moment. I did 1,100 miles with an electric Lightning this year because that's natural to me coming from Toyota. How did you get everyone on board and driving culture change at Uber, given it's yet another culture, a different starting point?
Yeah, I think for me, I had, if you want to call it that, the luxury, so to speak, of coming on board with Uber when Uber was had a huge crisis moment, right? It was the reason why I came on board was because the public view, and I think it was true internally as well, the company needed a culture change. This was a company that was challenging the status quo, and at some point, their challenge became so successful that they became an incumbent, but they still had a challenger mindset. And if you're an incumbent with a challenger mindset, you kind of feel like a bully. And so my luxury coming in was the company knew we needed a culture change. And one of the most important new cultural statements that we had for the company was do the right thing, period. And I remember when we talked about doing the right thing, period, people asked, well, what does that mean? Can you tell me more about what doing the right thing is? And we said, no. We are putting our trust in each and every one of the individuals here to understand what doing the right thing means. And with that responsibility comes with power, but we're giving that responsibility to you. We're not going to give you a handbook of what doing the right thing was. And then secondary for us was, we as a leadership team, I as a CEO, had to demonstrate specific actions that represented that culture of doing the right thing. So for example, Patty talked about safety. safety was a real issue at Uber. The safety of drivers and making sure that the drivers also coming onto the platform were safe, they had background checks, et cetera. And the old Uber culture was all about growth. So we would do the fewest possible, as little as possible to get away with in bringing drivers on board, because more drivers meant more growth. And for us, for example, one of the specific do the right thing moments for the company was slowing down driver onboarding, doing all of not just the least amount, but actually deep background checks. We'll look at your driver's background for 10, 15 years sometimes to make sure that someone coming on board and inviting you to that car is a safe person. It slowed down growth for 6 to 9 months. The team had to build a bunch of product to make up for a bunch of the safety mechanisms that we took on. It hurt the business financially, but that was also a leadership demonstration of doing the right thing, which started to percolate within the company. So it definitely worked out.
And I've been waiting to ask this question for you for a long time. When we started talking about lean, the OS behaviors as a leadership team, one of the superficial conflicts was innovation, because we had to go to this digital product, a new EV propulsion system, and so the innovation became super important for, frankly, the survival of Ford. And there was a perception on the leadership team that innovation and lean are somehow at odds with each other. But you're in the software business. I'd love to learn from you about rapid innovation at Uber. What's worked, what didn't? How do you see lean and innovation integrating in such a strong software development business?
Well, I think the first thing that I would say is I have a lot of respect and significant fear of the hardware business. Frankly, it's easier to innovate with software. The cycles are faster, et cetera. And I think for everyone, every company has to build out their own tool sets. For us, usually, we like to combine, again, a cultural mindset within specific activities within the cultural mindset. We have a cultural norm. Great minds don't think alike, right? So we actually like to promote differences in opinion, promote differences in background, et cetera. That diversity often makes it harder because you get a bunch of conflict, but that conflict actually then results typically in a better answer, sometimes a more difficult answer. And for example, we would team up that cultural mindset with very specific operating norms that we put in place. Like at Larry, we have monthly business reviews, but then we have a monthly tech review, for example, where every month we go through everything that we're building at the company. And one of the early rules that we put in the monthly tech reviews, one of the first things that you went through was what we call L30, N30. What did you accomplish in the last 30 days? And what are you going to accomplish in the next 30 days? And if you were going to accomplish it in the 31st day, you weren't allowed to talk about it. Some people, one way to create the illusion of you're doing a lot and being innovative is talking about your 2-year plans or 3-year plans or 5-year plans. You can fill out a whole PowerPoint there. We had certain groups coming up and saying we didn't ship anything in the last 30 days. We would make them come up there, and in the last 30 days we didn't ship anything. Believe me, the next time they came up, they made sure they were shipping something. So it's sometimes you just put instrument different operating practices, and this, for example, was one operating practice that worked for us. It was about continuous improvement. Some of the stuff worked, some of the stuff didn't. We had a lot more failures in this innovative way, but ultimately it sped us up, and it was a lean way for us to innovate. Jim, turning to you for a second, one very key area in terms of lean is respect. Respect for your workers, et cetera, especially your workers. This is a very important moment for you in terms of your relationship with your workforce. What does respect as it pertains to lean look like at Ford? And then how does it pertain to the conversations that you're having now?
Super important topic. I would say it was 130 degrees inside Kansas City assembly plant yesterday. We have 8,000 people that work there. So without our team members on the factory floor around the world, we have 60 plants making vehicles. We are nothing, like my grandfather. And they don't have a say in the big decisions we make. So Genba is going and seeing, and not superficially going, but like to actually learn why the top of the Bronco is so difficult to put on. And why do we have all these rework bays for that top? That Genba activity is like absolutely the most important physical act of respect. In the last 18 months, I've visited every plant globally, especially in North America. And, you know, it was interesting. People would do a visit and they would say, you know, well, we visited the plant. But like my standard was a little different coming from Toyota. I asked about the food and the washrooms, and I found out that after COVID, we stopped all hot food delivery, and we had like completely unacceptable bathrooms. I know it sounds really weird to talk about that, but for our 120,000 workers in our assembly plants around the world, it was totally unacceptable. The dignity of the workplace was not acceptable. And I'm sure, Dara, listening to your opening and reading online about your own delivery experience, you know, that came to fruition. So to me, instilling a lean mindset so that everyone feels their role in this transformation. And the most important thing is you cannot delegate as leaders the deep empathy for the impact of your decision making, and that you have to physically break the bonds that everyone's telling you don't have to do, to go and see and learn and listen with both ears, as my mom would say, and not do it to be noticed. And so we should keep this thread going. You know, I was so excited when I heard about you, you know, the undercover boss moment for you, delivering, driving. What inspired that? Like, and how did it change the way you and others at Uber operate now? Because in many ways, it seemed like the opposite, as you said, of the culture in the past.
It's a great question, Jim, but just commenting on something you said about listening, I do think listening is such an appreciated skill. Like there are all kinds of courses in terms of executive leadership, presentation courses. I still haven't seen a course on listening, right? And the one theme that I've seen, the common theme in life and this is a group of executives that is very high up in the executive ladder, is like the higher up you go in a company, the less you actually know what's really happening on the ground. And so Jim, you know, caring about the bathrooms and actually understanding what's happening with a product is just so important. And you're gonna have kind of structures around you that are pretty comfortable. I see a lot of managers managing to KPIs versus actually understanding the product that they're delivering. And I think one of the cool things about Uber is that people come to Uber because they really care about the product, and almost everybody uses a product either as an eater, they order Uber, or they've used it as a user, you know, ordering Uber to go to the airport, go out, et cetera. So we have a group of employees who are deeply, deeply connected to the product. But what we found was when we looked at our employee base and their connection with our driver base, that connection didn't exist. Right? It was how many drivers can we get on board, and there were, you know, we would do surveys with drivers, but very few of our employees actually drove, actually delivered. You know, honestly, what led me to deliver was that I was going, pardon my French, freaking crazy at home during COVID, and I wanted to get the hell out of the house, and I wanted to find some way of being constructive out of the house. So I got an e-bike and I started delivering food for Uber. And it was a great experience. It was tiring. It was difficult to understand the product. And for me, once I saw what I believe was a lack of quality with the product as it related to delivering. Then I bought a Tesla and I started driving as well. And it showed me literally that we as a company culturally were very much focused on the rider and the eater product because we used it ourselves. We took a lot of pride in it all the time, but we didn't take pride in the driver product because very few of us drove. So I started sending notes to our engineers, et cetera, and I started being very, very public with the company about our product. I still remember I made a presentation, all hands presentation. The headline of that presentation was Why We Suck. And it wasn't a pleasant kind of all hands with the company, but it set a tone. And we set that expectation. We started celebrating employees going out there delivering, employees driving. It is a point of pride for employees now. When they drive, they get a little badge on their corporate profile, et cetera. And as a leader, you've got to set the example. So just like Jim, you walk the halls in terms of your factories and you care about the bathrooms, et cetera. That example is going to push down to all your employees, and that's what you can do, as leaders, to set that example to get out there.
Totally. Another key pillar in lean is waste. And I remember when I took over as CEO, the head of manufacturing said, Jim, there's no waste in our plants. Because they were defensive. And I kind of walked the first plant as a CEO, and I'm pointing at all the body sides and stampings that are just sitting around. And I said, all the dirt in the air and all those, prove to me that inventory of stamped parts is fully competitive from a waste standpoint. And I got out the calculator, and we spent like an hour calculating how much wasted cash was in that one plant. And by the end of the day, I don't think they will ever say to me again, there's no waste in the plant. But at Uber, how do you identify and eliminate waste in your R&D and transactional process? Because it's so different than the world I live in, and I'm curious to learn from you.
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. So I think this is honestly one of the hardest things for a company. We do have processes that eliminate waste within the different operating processes of the company. Taking a look at driver onboarding and making sure that onboarding is as easy as possible, and any step that gets in the way of a driver onboarding is made as smooth as possible. We used to have you putting your documents. Now we'll pull those documents with APIs, with feeds, et cetera. So what I found is for companies, it's actually, if you put the processes in place, you can eliminate waste structurally. For us, what's been harder is actually eliminating processes that no longer serve the company well. I find often, companies, you set up a process to serve the company, and then all of a sudden everybody has to follow the process. So the company starts serving the process. And I'm like, hold on, the process is there to help us. We're not, servants of the process, so to speak. So we do have a process now where we go out and audit how we have built in the past. Because usually you're always trying to build the new things, but we have specific audits that go through. For example, we now have a process of building out globally by default, which is all of our local businesses, we're in 70 countries, have slight differences in terms of how they build. And some of these differences serve absolutely no purpose. It's because of a local GM decided X was better than Y. We go out, we audit those processes, and we make them consistent. Jim, I'm curious as to whether you go through the same process plant by plant. When one plant learns, is there a process to then spread that knowledge amongst other plants, or do you like that innovation, local innovation, so to speak?
It's a really important question. So we always have to have that local innovation, but the question is, how do you scale excellence sharing or benchmarking? I think what we found in manufacturing is a really cool process is the bus tour. And I know it sounds really simple, but we in a regional basis, like in the U.S., we have bus tours every quarter where people from one plant, all the leadership, all the salary plus key process coaches, and the manufacturing leadership of the company get on a bus and they actually go to multiple plants together and they do recognition, they do benchmarking, and you like physically benchmark. You don't like do it, as you said, by managing KPIs. You physically do it and you're on a bus together for 4 days. And it is a completely new thing at Ford that we've been doing for a year, and it has been transformational for us. I think that more organic, local benchmarking, I think, is probably the flavor for our process to share excellence in the short term, because we want it to be very organic and very physical, but also scalable across the world. I don't know if that makes sense for you.
Oh, it's awesome. That is, we don't need to get on a bus, but we definitely have different local teams that present globally, and that learning process is incredible. Absolutely.
So I had a next question, because you've been leading the organization for 6 years. Our lean journey is relatively new. We're certainly getting moments as a team, like the whole company gets stuck once in a while. Like our current stuck moment is problem solving. So what I found at Ford is that Ford is really world-class, like the best in the world at describing a problem. But like actually solving the problem and understanding root cause to do that is actually something that people do early in their careers, but over time actually didn't get better at it. So problem solving all the way through the organization and getting world-class at that, and no longer wasting any time doing business with ourselves and describing problems beyond the sufficiency of root cause analysis, is like we're kind of stuck right now. What did you do when you hit speed bumps along the way? How any advice you would give all of us on getting unstuck?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jim. And I think speed bumps for Uber are like a Thursday. We have them, we expect them. I'd say, honestly, the biggest speed bump that we had, and it felt like an anvil hitting us in the side of the head, was COVID, right? We lost 85% of our volume. And in hindsight, it shouldn't have been COVID that caused us as a company to really focus on what we were great at. Pre-COVID, we were engaged in tons of activities, building autonomous technology, manufacturing bikes and scooters, building flying cars, et cetera, that just weren't core to what Uber does. And frankly, we sucked at. Like, it's just, hardware is really hard. We're good at software, we're great at building marketplaces. I'll leave the hard work of manufacturing cars to Jim, and we build a service on top of those incredible cars that he's building. So it took COVID for us to really focus our teams on where we can add value, where are we truly great, where do we want to be greater, and where is it that we really don't belong? And for me, it was a lesson. And it's kind of like every year now, I kind of replay that, pretending that unbelievably unpleasant, if 80% of your business goes away and you really have to focus on the core, what would it be and what would I get rid of? That event caused the company to come together. That event caused the company to have that growth mindset, but with lean inside of it as well, and was a huge shift in terms of how we operated. Jim, we have time for only one more question, a simple one for you, which is, you're now transitioning from building IC cars to electric cars, the Mach-E and some of the other models that you've got. That's a huge change in terms of mindset, in terms of process, et cetera. What have you learned in terms of what Ford has to go to drive that transition? And generally, what have you learned about the overall industrial transition to electric vehicles?
I would say we learned that small teams are becoming more important. When we set up Team Edison to come up with like the Lightning pickup truck or the Mach-E or our electric van, all are kind of leading their segment with the exception of, Mach-E is doing great, but it competes with the Model Y. So there's a lot of competition. I think I saw the company, because it was before I was the CEO, kind of take the small team that came up with those products that have been doing really well in the market as kind of first inning products in a 9-inning game, and literally take the team apart because they were threatened by them. And so I restructured the company because of what I saw. I don't have the time for our internal combustion engine people to learn about electric vehicles and digital embedded electric architectures. So I had to set up almost a competing organization that has some dependency on each other. And I also found out that people who buy electric vehicles just want really good shit. They don't want science projects. They want like really great product. And so we were going to do a Prius, and I came back from Europe when I saw it, the first electric car, and I'm like, no, we got to lean into what we're really good at, which are like Mustangs and pickup trucks, and so those are positive things I learned. I think the biggest thing I learned is sometimes Kaizen requires a huge revolution, and as we're redoing in the second inning products that will have their own electric architecture, we can send a lot of software to the product. We actually had to have a revolution on the engineering the product for simplicity and for cost reduction. Not these huge batteries like our internal combustion engine business mindset would be like everyone should be able to get there in 600 miles, but actually with really small batteries, super efficient aero, and really simple engineering, so we could take 20 or 30% of the cost out of our manufacturing and supply chain so that I can compete when Tesla cuts their price $30,000, $20,000, which they now have. So I guess the biggest learning for me is sometimes Kaizen are like little improvements every day, and sometimes Kaizen means completely rewriting your engineering approach. That's what we've learned so far.
That's awesome. Well, Jim, thank you for joining us during this incredibly important time. Hopefully, folks have learned a lot from this conversation. Thanks for having us.